Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Let's get started, inshallah. We'll start with a recap of what we did yesterday, and we'll go over something called route guard and route resolver. And we'll have a practice session today, which I missed yesterday. So let's get started, inshallah. So what we did yesterday is we recapped what we did in our previous session to that, and we looked at how to pass data via route, and we use drop down and check boxes in our template driven forms. So the code that I had until yesterday, end of this session, I checked it in to get a GitHub. If you want to grab it from there and have a look at the differences of what we did, feel free to do so. That's one of the reasons why I have put this app in the public domain, so that you can revise and also look at the videos while you are revising. So after the quick recap, let's get started on something called route guard. So for example, let me just start the surf. Yesterday we added an edit form. We already had an add form, but we don't want them to be publicly available without any authentication, right? So we want some user that is authenticated, and not only authenticated but also authorized. So the user might be a regular user or an admin or a product admin in our case. Let's say, for example, if the user is an admin or a product admin, not a regular user, then only we should be letting the user add something, add a product in our case. So it depends on the scenario. If we have that kind of scenario, we need to protect that particular route, and that protection is provided by something called a route guard, which is nothing but a function that returns either yes or no, or in other words, true or false. So if it is true, then only the user will be able to get to that route. Otherwise, the user's action will yield nothing. So let's see how to write that. Even before surf, I think we can use the CLI to actually generate that route. ng generate guard. So we are generating a guard to protect a route, and that particular concept is called route guard. So ng generate guard. In our case, in our guard, the plan is to have a logic that would indicate to the user altered or figure out if the current user is logged in or not. So we'll give it a meaningful name that conveys that. So we'll just name the guard as authentication guard because we are generating a guard. The Angular CLI will add the guard suffix to it. So ng generate guard called authentication guard with var and flag. But because this is a flag or a guard that is supposed to be used across the application, we can generate it in a shared folder or some shared location instead of just cluttering the source folder. So if we just generate it, let me just select an option called can activate for now. Hit enter over here. So what it will do is it will add the guard at source/app. So instead we'll just create a shared folder or ask the CLI to create a shared folder and put it over there. It's asking us what kind of guard do we need. In this case, we talked about just activate route activation guard, but we can have other guards too, like can activate a child of that route, can deactivate, and can load. So we'll look at can activate and can deactivate, and believe they can activate child and can load for the exercise purposes. So let's see what our CLI command does. So it does add our guard to the shared folder and everything is good to me. Let me go ahead and remove the dry run flag and run the command again. So we have a guard here. So basically it is a function or it is a class actually. So which contains a function which either returns true or false. True means let it go, or telling the Angular that okay, whoever is activating, let them activate. If it is false, then yeah, stop them right there. Basically it cannot be just true or false. We'll have to add some logic to it. So for now, for just for the demonstration purposes, we'll have this as true and have a look at how to configure a route guard on a particular route. So we were the routes in our products module. So we'll protect only the product management module for now. So wherever we are defining the routes, we need to provide the route guard, and it accepts an array of guards. The guard that we just wrote, and Visual Studio Code automatically imported that for me. Let's serve. The next something called activated route snapshot is injected automatically in this method. Yesterday we talked about three kinds of dependency injection. One was the constructor that we were using all along in our components. Open some component. We were injecting in the constructor and a dependency called product service. Whereas over here, this is an example of method dependency injection. So can activate is a method, and activated route snapshot and router state snapshot are injected into it by default. So if our logic needs any of these, basically this has information about the current route. It will have information about the complete something called URL tree, and router state snapshot will have an information about the state of our application if we had stored any, if we had used it previously. So but right now these two for our purposes, for the authentication and guarding something uh, from non-authenticated or anonymous users, that's what our purpose is right now. So we'll just stick to that logic for now, and if time permits, then we'll try to go into the details of these two injected instances of activated route snapshot and router state snapshot. So product management module, we want to protect it. If the server is ready, probably we can open the application and have a look at it. This is product listing, and I'm trying to add a product right now because the logic is to allow everything. or to all everyone. I'll go ahead and change the guard to, or the can deactivate return statement to false. That didn't work. So we'll try to fix it. We'll try to troubleshoot. Add product component can activate. Write something to the log over here to see, to make sure that this function is getting hit. Console.log from can activate. It doesn't look like this one is refreshing automatically. Products. Okay. So now it kicked in because I refreshed it. From can, okay, from, it should have been from. So I mean, just what I meant from this message is this is getting logged from this can activate method. So this is getting executed just fine, and when I click on add product, nothing is happening. It's not going to the add product route, right? So because we are returning false, we are telling Angular that okay, this user is not, this guard is protected, and whatever the logic is inside that protection is not letting the user to go to that route. It's as simple as that. So while I'm at it, let me generate one more guard. Authentication one, or okay, I should have named it better instead of authentication guard. Let me see if I can rename it quickly. Authentication. It's very close to authorization. To AUTH might mean authorization or authentication, which is fine. Authorized user need to be authenticated anyway, but we'll have it explicitly over here so that we can differentiate the in the roles or something like that. So let's try to be better over here. Rename. Let's just move to a new file. Authentication card. I rename this. Rename symbol. Authentication card. I'll save all and make sure that it is still working. I've stopped it. So while I'm at it, let me generate another guard, which is called authorization guard. Authorization. So my purpose is the authentication guard will check if the user is authenticated or there is a current user, and authorization guard will check if the user is actually authorized to add a product in our case, or we can use it for edit too. So it depends on the user's role. So this is good. I'll start the application, and meanwhile I'll go to the module and add another card too. So in our case, probably we need this, the same can activate on edit tool. So basically, what it means is, for a route to be activated, all these route guards need to return true. If even one of them returns false, then the route cannot be activated. Now that the application is ready, and let's go to the authorization card, and yeah, it is returning true too. Let me make, okay, let me just first check that everything is working. Both are returning true, and add product. Okay, one of them was returning false, I guess. I did not change it back to true. So one of them was returning false. This is a good demo, I think, because one of them was returning false. The route did not get activated. And now it refreshed. Both of them are returning true. Now add product gets activated. Now we have another type of authentication, or another type of route guard, that is can deactivate. What it means is like, okay, once the user is in a certain route, can the user activate another route? Or in other words, can the user get out of this route? Or in other words, can the user deactivate this route? So for example, right now the form is not touched at all. So if the user was typing something and there was there were some values in the form, and if the form was big and the user by accident clicks on some other link or clicks the back button, most of the websites, they have the functionality of asking the user, okay, there are some changes. Do you really want to go to somewhere else without saving them first? So can deactivate guard could be used for other purposes, and let's try to use it for other purposes. And there might be other scenarios where can deactivate might play a role. Uh, yep. But that is the purpose that we will use is when the form is has some values and the user tries to navigate to some other page. I'm just deliberating about whether to include some concreteness to our activation guard instead of just returning true or false. Okay, we'll come back to that, but let's go to the can deactivate thing first, and let me stop this and generate another guard. I'll just name it as can deactivate, keep it multi-purpose, or yeah, anyway, it will get suffixed by the guard word, so we would be able to differentiate between the actual can deactivate function or method versus the guard. So let me just have a dry run first. Can deactivate the dry run. So it's asking me what kind of guard it is. I mean, I gave it a name, but it cannot infer from the name, so I need to tell the command line interface what kind of guard it is. So this is can deactivate guard. So this is what will happen, and everything looks fine. Source app shade folder, under the shade folder we have that guard, can deactivate guard, and let's run that without the dry flag or dry run flag. It is generated, and let's have a look as to what it generated. It doesn't look right because we gave it, did I not give it can deactivate? I think I made a mistake. Let me just delete those two files. Okay, can deactivate. This is where this is what I did, I believe. Okay, even though I selected deactivate, somehow the CLI is acting funny. It is generating a can activate instead of can deactivate. So we'll just manually do it for now. Can deactivate, I believe that is what it is. Add can deactivate to existing imports declaration, which I did, and then I'll have to implement can deactivate. Can deactivate, I believe, returns the same thing, but let's see. Remove unused declaration. Okay, can deactivate actually takes an interface. So let me just name that. It actually takes a type, and let me add a new type over here. Can I is stands for interface. It's a good practice to have an interface starting with the letter I. So I can deactivate. Let me define that interface somewhere over here. Just like models, we want to export this interface. So export interface. I can deactivate, and it will have a method called can deactivate or component can component be deactivated. Something like that. It's quite verbose, but let's just move on. It's complaining about something or trying to return type. Okay, let's return this as observable of boolean. I think that's okay. I don't know what this is complaining about, but let me try to fix that. Property can deactivate in type can deactivate guard is not assignable to the same property in the base. Can deactivate is not assignable. Okay. So can deactivate takes in a dependency along with others that returns the actual component that is trying to that is being deactivated. So that component will have to make the component inherit from that from our new interface and implement the can component be deactivated method. So I'll just inject the interface rather than a complete concrete component. So I can deactivate it. Interface can deactivate. That's done. Let me actually just add the code and try to fix the error later. Maybe when I add the code or remove something, things will be clearer. Okay. Probably it was not liking the other two things. So in any case, let's move forward and then we'll come back and try to figure out what went wrong when those two injections were there. So anyway, the component might implement that interface or might choose not to. If it doesn't have this implemented, then we'll just let the user deactivate. If it is indeed implemented, then we'll just return the result of the same implementation. So that line is clear. what we are doing is we are checking. So this question mark, this is like if and else statement. That's what I think, I believe we talked about that. So if this condition is true, the first thing after the question mark will get executed, if not the second one, and that is differentiated by a colon. So if can component be deactivated is found on the particular component that is getting deactivated, then run that method and return whatever is written by that method. Otherwise, just return true. So right now, because none of our components have implemented that particular interface, so we need to go back to, let's say, add product and implement that interface. And that interface was I can deactivate. So it's complaining now I haven't implemented that interface. I just indicated that I will implement, but I haven't implemented the method that is under it. So I ask Visual Studio to generate the skeleton of that method, and then over here, so what is our intention? Our intention is when the user has made any changes to the form and hasn't saved it yet, then don't let the user deactivate it. So we'll return, we'll first read the form. Okay, let me leave it like this for a minute, and for me to be able to access the form, I need a reference to the form. I don't have it yet. So how do I get reference to the form? I already have a product form over here, and this is a template reference variable which is good enough to just refer to the form in the template itself. Template reference variable is good enough to refer the form in the template itself. Same thing for product name, sorry, over here, product name. Template reference variable starts with hash and some text, and this is good enough to be referred within the template itself. So how do we refer it in the component class? We use something called viewChild. Just like the input property, viewChild is a decorator. It takes in either a string or a type. I think if I remember right, there is one more way to actually access it, but for now, let's just access it using the name given to this. So viewChild, we are asking the component class to look in the template and get a reference to this particular element, which is named product form. I'll name it as product form 2. Which is of type ng form. I don't know the exact type of that form that will be written, but let me just go with any for now. So in can component be deactivated method will refer to that product form and see if it is dirty first. If it is dirty, that means a user had made some changes to that form, or the user is not trying to just get out of that form without making any changes, because that would be not prudent to ask the user who hasn't made any changes to the form to make sure that he has to save the form first, right? So we'll have to check if the form was indeed touched and something was changed in the form. If the form is dirty and the form also, or Angular's form also exposes a property called submitted. If the user has already submitted, that means, in other words, that the form is saved. So we don't want the user in that case either. So if the form is dirty and the form should not be submitted, constant, let me just name it as B. So if that happens, then let the user go. If not B, return false. Let me just have it as not observable but boolean, I believe. I'm just trying to condense this. Instead of checking the condition, I can easily, I believe, return B instead of writing this code. So if B is true when it should be dirty and it should not be submitted. In that case, we don't let the user deactivate. So this should be not B. Let's see if it goes wrong, then we'll just switch to B. So let me start the application. So while this might work, what we are doing is we are checking the form. If it needs to be saved, we are not letting the user deactivate, but we are not giving any indication to the user over here uh, why something is not happening when he is clicking on, let's say, some link or back button or something like that. We need to let the user know. That would be a good practice. What we can do is just alert the user, something like unsaved changes, or instead of alerting in the guard, maybe it's a good idea to alert the user from the component itself. So in that case, we'll need that condition. If not be, even better would be to prompt the user, to ask the user if he wants to discard the changes altogether. So confirm unsaved changes. Do you still want to navigate away or something like that? Return whatever is the confirmation, else return true. I hope that logic is sound. If it is not, we'll come back and fix it. So get us ready. Products, add product. So I type in something and I click on, let's say, home. Oops. So it didn't work. We'll go back and fix it, but okay. Just add a debugger over here. Okay, that's not getting hit at all. Oh, okay, we did not add that the guard in the route itself, or where we have defined the route. So I'll go ahead and take care of that now. Can deactivate It also takes an array, so we don't have to have just one deactivation logic at one place. We can have multiple, can deactivate logics in multiple deactivation guards. So our guard is named can deactivate guard. We need to have it in both places. Okay. So I made some changes. Try to navigate away. Hit the debugger, but still it didn't work. At least it's hitting now. Let's try to troubleshoot that. So the product from dirty is true. If it is submitted, false. And not submitted, this is true. So B is true right now. This should be just B, not B. Let's make the change and rerun again. Products, add product, make some changes. And unsafe changes, do you still want to navigate away or cancel so that I stay right over there just to test it out? And unsafe changes, do you still want to navigate away? Okay, now the user is on a different route. And let me just not touch the form and try to navigate away. We should not be getting that dialog at all. Yep, that worked. So that's about protecting a route from getting activated or deactivated. Uh, can activate route is little bit easier than can deactivate route or route guard. The complexity arises from having to specify a type to the can deactivate implementation. So it expects a type, and that type we need to provide it. And one of the common implementations of providing that type is just writing an interface with a method that could be called on a component. So the component needs to implement the interface and provide the logic, and in either yes or no, the guard will take care of it. But other guards were easier, just provide some logic with there itself without having to worry about the type and all that stuff. So now that our guards are in place, let's try to look at the resolver. So if time permits, we'll try to add some logic in the authorization and authentication guard. But for now, the takeaway is for the can activate guard, we just need to return from the can activate method either true or false. Or even all the guards will just return either true or false depending on some logic. So authentication guard is supposed to authenticate the user and return true if the user is authenticated and false if otherwise. Similarly with the authorization guard. But authorization guard needs to go a little bit further and get the roles of the user and see if the user is authorized to perform some operation and return. So most likely the authorization guard will have some logic to actually get the user roles or user permissions to do some operation. So it needs some kind of input from the maybe router state snapshot if that is passed along in that particular instance, or somehow else, or go to the database and get the permissions of the user. So basically it might need to make a call to the user service to get those permissions or roles. So the other authentication guard is kind of a little bit easier compared to maybe some other guard, some other can activate guard. In this case, we talked about authorization, how it is little bit complexer than the authentication guard. Anyway, so let's keep on moving to the next concept called resolver. Let me close all of these windows, tabs, close all, and let me use Control P and try to open edit product component. So also try to find product slash edit. So from the product listing component, which is passing the buck of displaying the product details to the product component, we introduced a link to edit a product, and that particular product's ID is passed in the route like this. And when the user actually clicks on that link, we grab the ID from the route, and the route exposes something called snapshot, which is activated route snapshot, which we have just seen in the guard itself, in the authentication guard. So it provides a snapshot of what's in the route, and using the params property of that snapshot, we got the ID from the route, and using that ID, we call the product service to get the actual product details. So the user clicks on that edit link, and until this product gets loaded, probably the user will just have to wait and stare at the blank screen or the screen for which the product's details are not available yet. So one way to resolve that problem of user having to stare at a screen that is not rendered yet, there is a concept called route resolver. Basically, what it means is, don't load the route or render the route until that particular thing is resolved. In our case, until the fetching of the actual product is resolved. So basically that means these two lines. So let me repeat that. A route resolver is the concept where we resolve something first before proceeding to the route. So for that, let me open product management module and see how it can be configured. We had these guards, and right after the guard we can, or before the guard, it doesn't matter where, resolve, and we provide product resolver, which is not there yet. We'll have to write that. We'll write that in a bit. So this is the way we configure a resolver. So resolve, what we are telling Angular is, okay, before proceeding to this route, take care of these route guards, and then take care of the resolving or the resolve, and then proceed to the route. So I wrote the resolve function, resolve, or I instantiated, I assigned the property of resolve under the add path. Why would one want to have a resolver on an add product component? So let me lay out the case. Let's say instead of having the max length and minimum length hard coded in the template itself, which we have done, leave in add product. here we gave a min length and max length. We want to control it from the database. So we query the database as to what those configurations are, and we try to assign it somewhere else, right? So for that purpose, we need to resolve what those limits are first, or we need to get those limits first. So in that case, we can have something like, okay, get the validation resolver or configuration resolver. I mean, it depends. We can name whatever we want depending on what exactly we want to do. But this might be the case where we want to resolve something on the add product. But in particular, in this particular scenario, or what we talked about a little bit earlier, is for at least for the edit route, we need to resolve get product resolver. We need to get that product first. I don't know a way of generating a resolver using the Angular CLI. We'll have to manually write the resolver now. And that's not a big deal. Again, it's pretty simple. All we need to do is put the logic of getting the product or getting the ID from the route. Over here, there was the edit product component over here, and get this logic out and get the product before getting to the route and provide that product to the route itself. So I'll just comment these two lines, and we'll need the product property but not ID property anymore, because the product would be given to this component, not just the ID, by the resolver. So let me write the resolver right away, right here, and then we'll move it to some other file later on. So first of all, the resolver would need to be an injectable. Injectable, and it's supposed to be, if the resolver is, yeah, let me just go in, provide it in for root, and then we'll come back. Let's try to finish this as soon as possible so that we have enough time to practice. And that is again a class just like any other thing, and because it is decorated by injectable, it is a candidate for the dependency injection in the Angular system. Export class, and what is our resolver? And it implements an interface called resolve, and it expects a type, and the type would be our product. Let me move it to a new file right now so that I don't export unnecessary things in this file and then take care of the cleanup later. So resolve, I'll use Visual Studio's ability to import all the missing interfaces, and again implement the resolve method. So resolve is an interface which has one method, and that needs to be implemented by whoever is implementing that particular interface, and that method is called resolve, and resolve is can be injected by these two, and depending on the need we can use them or not. So in this case we need something else. These two I'm not sure. So and that something else is the product service. Private product service, product service of type product service. So now that I have that, oops, okay. So over here, I think I can just copy those two lines from over there. So remember I mentioned about various ways of getting a value out of the route, and one other way is get the param map of activated route snapshot. So back over here, we got it from the something called activated route, and right over here we have available an activated route snapshot. So how to get the ID out of that is this dot route dot param map. This for that because it doesn't belong to the class, it's belong to this method. So param map dot get, or I believe even the square brackets were just fine, but there is another way to get something out of it. So there is no this dot id, just declare it as constant, and there is no this dot products, we are returning this the product right from here, and there is no this dot id. Okay, the shortcut to convert a string to an integer in TypeScript, and I believe maybe in JavaScript itself, is just add a plus in front of it at that place, or maybe over here. Both are fine. So basically we are asking that this resolver to get something and then provide it back to whoever is asking this resolver. So in our case, this is, we have a route called edit product, and that's what that route is asking to resolve getting the products first. Okay. So back over here, we need that product, right? We need the product, and that could be accessed in the activated route itself using the name that we have provided it. So resolve is actually an object, not just a method, which takes a name of whatever gets resolved by this resolver and puts it in a property called res in this case. So if we just change it to retrieve product So that's where that after resolution, whatever we get, that's where it will be populated. Then it's just a matter of accessing that this dot product. So now actually we don't have an observable, but instead we'll have a concrete product. Let's have that property called product, and it will be of type product. This dot route dot snapshot. But in this case, this will be available, or the resolved product will be available where a data property and not the params property. So what was the name that we gave in our retrieve product and assign it to this dot product. Oops. Okay. There is a question over here. Please explain resolve method, return type resolve method in get product resolver. Okay. Basically, it says it can be of type product because we already gave it a type over here, a particular type. So it can be of that type, or an observable of that type, or a promise of that type. So it could be either one. I mean, even though I just went for a product, it could be any one of those. Okay, is that clear, or you want me to go further or try to explain it in a different way? Basically, in this case, the pipe symbol, okay, pipe symbolizes or. So the return type might be a product, or it might be an observable of type product, or a promise of type product. Because over here, it's an observable. So most likely we'll get an observable of the product because we are returning from the product service itself. So yeah, probably that raises a good point that most likely product dollar was just fine enough rather than this dot product. But let's see, let's add a debugger and see what we are expecting is what we get. Okay. Products and edit product. Null injector product service. No provider for product service. Let's see what's going on. Injector. Services provided over here. Get product resolver. Where is it? It's in product management, which is good. Okay, we need to actually get the resolver in the providers array too. So get products resolver. Get product resolver, not the products. Let's hit over there. So edit product works. We haven't implemented anything inside of it. So basically, I mean, even though we are unable to see that, but because it's very quick, we are hard coding the products. We are not going out of our out to the public network and trying to get the products. So there is no delay, virtually no delay at all. So let's introduce some delay over here somehow. So instead of actual get products, what we will do is we'll use a service over here that gives us something with a delayed response. So it gives us a delayed response after a delay of 3 seconds, I believe. So let's see that and see the resolver in action. And from the get resolver, instead of doing this, and just inject HTTP client over here. Client.get. I'll use the same URL. So that I get a response after 3 seconds, and then until then we should be able to see that we are not navigating to the edit product page until those 3 seconds. Products, edit. Let me introduce an extra delay like maybe 10 seconds. Okay, I don't know if it is really 10 seconds. That's what that it doesn't look like that much. Oh, I did not written anything, I'm sorry. Okay, it doesn't like the fact that it's not returning a type of product, because I believe I should give a product here. It shouldn't mind that because we are not consuming anyway. It tries to convert it to a type product, but it should fail. We should be fine with that because we are not consuming it. So for our demonstration purposes, it should be just good. Okay. Okay. I don't know what's happened, but at least there is a little bit delay this time. Let me just make it any and see if that works. I was hoping to be a visible delay so that we can just see it in action. But it doesn't look like it. Oh, actually, yeah, it is working. Oh, I should have waited for 10 minutes. Oh, sorry, 10 seconds. Okay, now it came back. So that's when the route was, I mean, after resolving whatever was provided as a resolver to that, the Angular proceeded to that route. So it took 10 seconds before this got rendered. So anyway, let me undo all the changes that I've just made, just to have a demonstration of that resolver and go back to the state that we want our resolver in. Okay. So just to recap, route guard and route resolvers were a little bit verbose. Just to get the concept, we have to do a lot of things or explain it various ways. But the concept is very simple. Guard is something that guards a route from getting activated or loaded or their children loaded or deactivated. So we saw the two examples. One is activate and deactivate. Either way, we are providing some logic that results in either a yes or a no, or in other words, in technical words, either true or false. True will let that guard, will let Angular or tell the Angular that okay, let someone through that route. Or false means okay, don't let anyone through that route. Either activation or deactivation or load of children. It's pretty simple, and even the logic is simple once we get the concept. All it takes is some logic. So for example, if we had a real user service, what we could do is check from the user service. We provided in the, actually this is not an injection, I'm sorry, I explained it wrong. This is not an injection, this is not dependency injection. This is just the two parameters or kind of the type of parameter that is method expects. I'm sorry about that. So I'm injecting something over here in the constructor, and this not user service. If we had a method of okay, we already have a get current user, but it's kind of fake, or we have is user logged in, then return that instead of just true from here. So this it would be something like this, and then for the authorization guard, it would be something like get user get user permissions, and then once we have the permissions dot something like is in role, and the role name is product admin or product manager or whatever role signifies that this particular user is authorized to perform an add edit operation or can add. I mean, it depends on what strategy the team has adopted for these permissions. So can add. So if it is for add product, we can check if the user can add product. If it is edit, then edit. Or in some cases, there might be the permissions might be more granular. Something like this. Can edit product name. Can edit product brand. So yes, there are scenarios and there are implementations along those lines too, going more granular than just at a higher level of letting a user edit a product. So something like that. If the user is in that role, then return that. So basically, return a true or false eventually. And can deactivate was little bit complex, sir, compared to can activate guard, in that we had to define an interface, and then because that was supposed to be a generic, if it is not a very generic case, if it is specific to a particular component, probably it will be simple, but if it was supposed to be generic, and whenever it is something is generic, it will be a little complex than non-generic things. Anyway, that's what we looked at. for the guards, and for the resolver basically it means okay, we are telling Angular okay, until this is resolved don't go further. In other words, it means in our case get the product first and then let the user to the next stage, that is to that particular route. So next session we'll look at hopefully reactive forms, but let's go back to our practice session in whatever time we have left. So that would be app 3. In app 3 I believe we generated a lot of things, components for add and edit task, and a navbar component, and probably changes to app routing module to add our new routes. Okay, let me just stop the other one and check the changes here so that I have the latest at GitHub. Okay, that's done. Okay, I'm just deliberating what to practice or what. We already generated quite a few things. I believe we generated service and module. Yes, there should have been task module. Okay, module, and then we generated quite a few components too. So let's go inside and maybe start with navbar or add task. Let's go with add task because it involves a form, and getting a practice on the form would be a better idea. We'll try to come back to navbar at some point of time. It's taking quite a bit over here. Okay, finally it started. Anyway, let's open the add task and try to add some meat over here. So the first thing we need is a form. We'll name the form as task form. This is a template reference variable which we, without doing anything else, will be able to refer this within the template itself. And this will be of type ng form, and we are binding it to ng submit event. And we'll write a submit method within the component class. So close the form, and form will probably have again a name of the task, and for that we need an input control, and to display some label in front of the input control we'll need a label, but let's first write the input of type. By default it's text, but let's have it explicit. And the form controls, for the ng model to work with the form controls, the name attribute is a must, so we'll have it as a name. Name is task name, and id will have the same task name, and we'll bind it to ng model, or to bind it to ng model. So task dot name, but we haven't defined the task class here, so let's go ahead and define that. So once we have compiled successfully, next time it should be quick. So let's stop that and generate our class. Ng generate, let's have it in the models folder, and task dry run. And I'll give it what type to generate. So ng generate class and models folder, and the class name is task. Okay, that's what it did. Remove the dry run flag. Now it's there. I need to go back to add task component and have a property over there called task, which is of type task. So now that I have it, I need to go to the task and have the properties of the particular class defined. So name is a property, string. Let's say it has a deadline of type date. It should have an ID, a uniquely identifiable ID, so that we can query it and get a single value rather than an array of values. So ID, that should be of type number. And anything else? Let's start with these. Let me have it one. Another boolean property called if it is done. Okay, that's good enough for now. So I have three different properties that we can set, and let me have a category too, just to have a variety of input properties so that we could practice those variety or diverse input fields. Category will have a strongly typed category instead of just string, and we don't have a class for it yet, so I'll just ask Visual Studio to generate one, but it looks like it's not giving me any option, so I'll just type it. It wasn't giving me an option to generate a class. I could use the Angular CLI, but maybe this is not that big of a deal because our classes are very small right now. So category, again ID, number of type number, and probably name of type string. I'm just thinking if instead of a class, an enumeration would be better. Enumeration, is it daily, weekly, monthly? Okay, that's good enough just to have a different type rather than going for the classes all the time. So input type name, and we need a label for this. Label for, we need to give the name of the control that this label is for. And straight line. So because this is of type date, then we can just change input of type from text to date. And then the next thing we have is a Boolean property called done. So for that we go for a checkbox, task done. So our time is up. We'll take a break here and then come back to practice and then go further in our normal course in our next session. Okay. Till then, any questions? Use the group to ask a lot of questions and keep practicing. Practice makes you much better. Grasp the concepts. Without practice, will not get confident in answering even if we know the answer. So we talked about route guards, and without practice, uh, the words that will come out of your mouth will not be that confident if you had enough practice. So keep practicing. It builds your confidence, not only just with respect to the terminology, but also with respect to the layout of the explanation whenever you are asked. So it's particularly very important during the interviews to have a coherent, clear answer. All right, till then, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.